How do you see this latest pitch coming in from the External Affairs Minister, and what does it do to expanding India's soft power when it comes to this muscular diplomacy that we're seeing at multilateral forums?
Absolutely, Ayushman. Thank you very much for inviting me again to your show. As far as soft power is concerned, there is a very clear diplomatic signaling, both to the international community and certainly, of course, to China and Pakistan, and also domestically, because every government owes it to its domestic constituency to come out with facts. And that's what Minister Jaishankar is doing. And I think he's cast in a heroic mold as a Minister of External Affairs. And this is very consistent. This is not something new. He's been saying it for a long time, that you cannot have an abnormal situation on the border and a normal relationship otherwise with China. That's the consistent Indian policy. And he is speaking in all fora, and you mentioned soft power, and that is the job of our diplomats, our top diplomat, our minister. Now, we have to also see this Indian activism perhaps a little bit more than it was in the past, certainly with regard to China. We just heard that we were not willing to call out China with regard to listing of terrorists, and they are reluctant to list them. Now, what is happening is you have to see this in the totality of the strategic scenario around India. You just had the Agni test today. Mm-hmm. You had a video released the other day, significantly, and I think the timing was quite apt after the clash in Yangtze, in Tawang with the Chinese, and this video seemed to suggest that it's the Indians who had the upper hand, who actually pushed back the Chinese. Yeah. This kind of narrative, which is visual, and you using the media also to give clear signals, and I think this is very welcome, because we are not ambiguous anymore with regard to signaling to China. We are more transparent, we are more clear, but how far we can sustain this will of course depend on the economic situation as it unfolds in India, and how far we can grow and how fast we can grow, and how much time it will take us to close the gap with China. As far as Pakistan is concerned, yes, of course, this government has been very consistent after its first few years in the first term of its office in 2014, when there was an olive branch to Pakistan. Nothing wrong with that. But after that, it's been a consistent policy. And we have to call out the nexus between China and Pakistan. And we have to tell our people as to the dangers before the Indian nation, the strategic dangers and the territorial dangers, and the dangers to our national integrity and to our territorial integrity and national unity. This is very important, because people should not forget when they are buying Chinese smartphones.
Mm-hmm. And Ambassador Mishra, when it comes to this muscular diplomacy that you see from the External Affairs Minister, you are saying that despite a similar geopolitical scenario, of course, there's an escalation with China, but with Pakistan, the situation is quite the same. The root of this muscular diplomacy, is it nothing more than political will from the center?
No, I don't think so, because India has certain attributes of hard power. Let's not just reduce it to game of domestic politics. Mm-hmm. Of course, there is domestic politics. Every government has to try and stay in power. That is the first job of a government, because they can carry out their agenda only by staying in power, not by being out of power. So every government does that. But I think that's too simplistic a notion, right. Because what I am seeing is that, for example, Kartavya Path, Kingsway becomes Kartavya Path, and the statue of Netaji is installed. And our minister says, talks about 2 centuries of humiliation with regard to Britain. Now, this is not just about China and Pakistan. It's a much more larger approach to try and correct historical wrongs, and to try and deal with historical injustices as the nation grows stronger. We are a $3.2 trillion economy, and will be perhaps $5 trillion in a few years, and will be number 3 by 2030. And many trajectories also indicate that India will be perhaps even number 1 in the year 2100, long time from now,
Long time from
but
now.
certainly number 3 and perhaps number 2 in the second half of the century. So strategic patience is required with regard to China. Today, China has the upper hand. Tomorrow, China may not have the upper hand. And I think they are understanding our signaling that our appetite to take greater risks is very clearly demonstrated, for example, in the Kailash Heights. So I don't think it's about domestic politics at all. It's much more than that. And I welcome that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ambassador Mishra, for sharing your perspective on this dynamic situation that is taking place ever since the Tawang clashes took place in Arunachal Pradesh, where you see this muscular diplomacy coming in from the Indian side. We gave it back to China when it comes to the line of actual control, and we're also doing that at international forums, that charge being led by External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. Getting some more breaking